The Apology is believed to be among the earliest of the Platonic works, and focuses on the apology, or defense, of Socrates, his beloved teacher when facing trial for not recognizing the gods recognized by the state, inventing new deities, and for corrupting the youth of Athens. The text is almost certainly not a word-for-word account of Socrates' defense speech, but rather a fictional dramatization by Plato, albeit one which probably cleaves closer to the spirit of the true Socrates when compared with Plato's later works. In this video, I will make reference to Stephanus numbers, which are a system of reference and organization which has been used for dividing up the works of Plato ever since they were collected, translated, and published in a 3-volume work in Geneva in 1578 by Henry Estienne, whose last name translates to Stephanus in Latin. Stephanus numbers are usually found in the margins of most modern translations. The Apology begins following the statement of the accusing party, a threefold group including Anytus, who opposed sophistry on principle, Lycon, who believed Socrates was a partisan of the recently deposed pro-Spartan oligarchy which had killed his son, and Meletus, who appears to have taken on Socrates to make a name for himself. Socrates begins his speech by ironically praising the words of his accusers and then downplaying his own rhetorical skill, stating in 17d, "The position is this. This is my first appearance in a law court. At an age of 70, I am therefore simply a stranger to the manner of speaking here." However, Socrates is less concerned with the specific accusations against him in this particular trial than the rather large body of rumours and ill will that existed amongst the Athenian population, which he attributes to earlier accusers who, with the exception of Aristophanes, the comic poet who satirized Socrates in his play The Clouds, are unknown to him. It is these earlier accusers that Socrates fears because, as per 18b, they got hold of most of you from childhood, persuaded you, and accused me quite falsely, saying that there is a man called Socrates, a wise man, a student of all things in the sky and below the earth, who makes the worse argument the stronger. Socrates goes on to claim these allegations are baseless, deliberately setting himself apart from the Sophists, a group of itinerant teachers who took money to provide education to young men. However, Socrates acknowledges that some in the crowd may believe that where there is smoke, there is fire, as per 20c. One of you may perhaps interrupt me and say, "But Socrates, what is your occupation? From where have these slanders come? For surely, if you did not busy yourself with something out of the common, all these rumours and talk would not have arisen, unless you did something other than most people. Tell us what it is, that we may not speak inadvisedly about you." Socrates states that this ill will stems from an oracle that his friend, called Chaerephon, received when he visited the oracle at Delphi, which, as per 21a, he asked if any man was wiser than I, being Socrates, and the Pythian, being the oracle, replied that no one was wiser. Socrates, perplexed at the oracle but unwilling to dispute the divine directly, decides to go and find another wiser than himself, so as to refute the oracle. He sought out politicians, poets, and artisans of all stripes to find another person wiser than himself, but repeatedly instead found individuals who may have had a reputation for wisdom, but were in fact merely ignorant of their own ignorance. However, in the process of discovering this fact, and attempting to correct his interlocutor's faults, Socrates found himself the target of rebuke and dislike, as per 21c and d. "I thought that he appeared wise to many people, and especially to himself, but he was not. I then tried to show him that he thought himself wise, but that he was not. As a result, he came to dislike me, and so did many of the bystanders. So I withdrew and thought to myself, I am wiser than this man. It is likely that neither of us knows anything worthwhile, but he thinks he knows something when he does not, whereas when I do not know, neither do I think I know, so I am likely to be wiser than he is to that small extent, that I do not think I know what I do not know. After this, I approached another man, one of those thought to be wiser than he, and I thought the same thing, and so I came to be disliked both by him and by many others. Having addressed as to why he has gained such an ill reputation, Socrates now addresses the accusations that he corrupts the young. He agrees that many young men follow him around of their own free will, mainly because they delight in him revealing the ignorance of those with pretensions to wisdom. He then calls forth Meletus and engages in something called an elenchus, or cross-examination. This is the process which Socrates uses throughout many of the Platonic dialogues to reveal the ignorance of his interlocutors. In this particular instance, he reveals the absurdity of Meletus's claim of Socrates being the corrupter of the youth. Socrates begins by forcing Meletus to affirm the position that all the other Athenians improve the youth, while only Socrates corrupts them, as per 24e to 25b. Tell me, my good sir, who improves our young men? The laws. That is not what I am asking, but what person who has the knowledge of the laws to begin with? These jurymen, Socrates. How do you mean, Meletus? Are these able to educate the young and improve them? Certainly. All of them? Or some, but not others? All of them. Very good, by Hera. You mentioned a great abundance of benefactors, but what about the audience? Do they improve the young or not? They do too. What about the members of the council? The councillors also. But Meletus, what about the assembly? Do the members of the assembly corrupt the young, or do they improve them? They improve them. All the Athenians, it seems, make the young into fine, good men, except me, and I alone corrupt them. Is that what you mean? That is most definitely what I mean. Socrates then attacks this position by comparing the raising of youths to the rearing of foals, where only a single or very few trainers rear the horse to reach its peak of potential, while the many, who do not understand the correct means of raising and teaching a horse, give them bad habits and corrupt them. If we accept this analogy, as Socrates hopes, then clearly Meletus has no understanding of corruption and virtue. Socrates then goes on further to state that if he was corrupting the youth of Athens, then he would run the risk of being harmed by them, following 25e to 26a. Are you so much wiser at your age than I am at mine that you understand that wicked people always do some harm to their closest neighbours, while good people do them good? But I have reached such a pitch of ignorance that I do not realize this. Namely, that if I make one of my associates wicked, I run the risk of being harmed by him, so that I do such a great evil deliberately, as you say. Socrates then argues that therefore, even if he has unwittingly corrupted the youth, that his fellow citizens should have stopped and educated him, rather than brought him before a court of law and punishment. In this statement, I would argue that we see echoes of the later Platonic idea seen in the Republic that no individual does evil intentionally. Socrates now moves to the charges of impiety, being that he either refuses to worship or mocks the state gods and attempts to introduce new deities. Meletus puts forward in 26d that, by Zeus, juryman, he sees that the sun is stone and the moon earth. Socrates refutes that he has never said such a thing, and that it was Anaxagoras, one of the early Greek physicalist philosophers, that had expounded such ideas. Socrates then, using the elenchus, forces Meletus to affirm that he accuses Socrates of being an atheist, a punishable crime in Athens. However, Socrates now pounces and points out that by charging him of being an atheist and of introducing new gods, he has clearly contradicted himself, as per 27d and e. Then, since I do believe in spirits, as you admit, if spirits are gods, this is what I mean when I say that you speak in riddles and in jest, as you state that I do not believe in the gods, and then again that I do, since I do believe in spirits. If on one hand the spirits are the children of the gods, bastard children of the gods, by nymphs or some other mothers, as they are said to be, what man would believe children of the gods exists, but not gods? That would be just as absurd as to believe in the young of horses and asses, namely mules, to exist, but not to believe in the existence of horses and asses. But even if Socrates is doing nothing wrong, why should he continue down this path of testing his fellow citizens, if it has led to such a bad reputation and the possible loss of his life? Socrates argues that, although it is possible to escape death by doing the wrong thing, the harder goal is to avoid injustice. Further, if he was willing to disobey the oracle at Delphi and hold his tongue, then he truly should be tried for impiety and failing to follow the divine will. He states that if the jury are willing to pardon him on the condition that he ceases his inquiries and questioning, he says, as per 29d to E, "If you were to acquit me on those terms, I would say to you, Gentlemen of the jury, I am grateful and I am your friend, but I will obey the God rather than you. And as long as I draw breath and am able, I shall not cease to practice philosophy, to exhort you, and in my usual way to point out to any one of you whom I happen to meet, Good sir, you are an Athenian, a citizen of the greatest city with the greatest reputation for both wisdom and power. Are you not ashamed of your eagerness to possess as much wealth, reputation, and honours as possible, while you do not care for nor give thought to wisdom or truth or the best possible state of your soul?" Socrates describes himself as a gadfly, an insect biting and tormenting the body politic, which Socrates likens to a beast of burden. The beast slumbers happily in its unjust ways, but Socrates, like a fly, agitates the animal and forces it to awaken, face its own unjust ways, and improve itself on the path to virtue. In this regard, Socrates considers himself a gift to the Athenian population, and that because of his irksome ways he had to maintain a private life devoid of the political benefit or positions for himself. At this point, Socrates also mentions that since his youth he has been haunted by a daemon, a spiritual sign, which always stops him when he is about to do something wrong. This spirit, which Meletus has disparaged in his accusatory speech, would have prevented Socrates from holding a public position and lying. Some scholars have debated as to whether this is a religious experience, a form of psychosis, a philosophical device used by either Socrates or Plato, or merely a fabrication, although there is no clear consensus as to which of these is the most probable explanation. Socrates finishes his defense by burnishing his democratic credentials, probably to ward off the implied critique that he was a partisan of the pro-Spartan oligarchy which had replaced the democracy following Athens' defeat during the Peloponnesian War. He also states that he has not sought to use sympathy to turn the minds of the jury, as this would degrade himself and the city as one with a reputation of wisdom, and more importantly, because he believes that justice should not be a gift, but something meted out fairly by the court. At this point of the dialogue, the vote of guilt is taken, and Socrates is found guilty by a small margin. Meletus has already spoken again, this time arguing for the death penalty. In Athenian law, the defendant must present an alternate and lesser punishment. Socrates argues that he should be punished according to his just deserts, and as he has done good for the city, he should be rewarded. As per 36d, what is suitable for a poor benefactor who needs leisure to exhort you? Nothing is more suitable, gentlemen, than for such a man to be fed in the Prytaneum, much more suitable for him than for any one of you who has won a victory at Olympia with a pair or team of horses. The Olympian victor makes you think yourself happy. I make you happy. Besides, he does not need food, but I do. So, if I must take a just assessment of what I deserve, I assess it as this: free meals in the Prytaneum. The Prytaneum, a public building or hall in ancient Greek cities, which served as a place of meeting and dining for state officials, was also used to provide hospitality for distinguished citizens and visitors, including Olympic victors. This speech seems almost designed to antagonize the jury, who vote immediately by a much larger margin to condemn Socrates to death. Having been condemned, Socrates gives a quick speech, firstly addressed to his accusers. He states that their condemnation will be reflected poorly upon them by the rest of Greece, condemning them as the killers of Socrates. He also muses that if they had only waited for a short time, nature would have seen him off, thanks to his advanced age. Now that he is condemned, Socrates predicts that the young men who have followed him up until now will continue his task, but with even less tact and gentleness. Now, to those that voted for his acquittal, he urges them not to feel aggrieved, for death is not harmful. To quote from 40b to c, let us reflect in this way, too, that there is good hope that death is a blessing, for it is one of two things. Either the dead are nothing and have no perception of anything, or it is, as we are told, a change and a relocating for the soul from here to another place. Here, Socrates seems to hold a much more agnostic position towards the immortality of the soul than what is seen in later Platonic dialogues, perhaps because Plato is less sure of the doctrine himself, but also because such a definitive statement would be at odds with the skeptical statement of only knowing that Socrates knows nothing. However, to shore up this position, Socrates states that his daemon did not prevent him from undertaking his defense as previously described. Therefore, Socrates reasons, the penalty of death must not be an ill thing, which his daemon would have prevented him from undertaking. So, what are we to make of the Apology as a work? It is very different to most of the other early Platonic dialogues, in that it consists primarily of a dialogue by Socrates, rather than a back and forth of the elenchus. I think, first and foremost, this work represents a defense of Socrates' legacy by a faithful and bereaved student in the form of Plato. Plato appears to be attempting to refute the accusations and rumors that both dogged Socrates during his lifetime and probably followed him around after his execution. Firstly, Plato wanted to directly show that Socrates wasn't an atheist or a corrupter of the youth, instead insisting that he had a purer vision of the gods compared to the everyman, and that he was only focused on the betterment of the youth and the city. Furthermore, Plato appears to be trying to distance Socrates from the ill reputation of the sophist class by reinforcing that his actions were not motivated by financial ends, and, furthermore, Plato situates Socrates within the democratic tradition and against both the excesses of the mob but also the tyranny of the recent oligarchy. However, beyond a straight defense, it could also be supposed that the Apology was a consolation to Socrates' friends and students, many of whom fled Athens in the immediate aftermath of his execution. The final speech to those who acquitted Socrates shows him as 1. Having died for truth, and 2. Arguing that death itself was not a bad thing. I am not suggesting that all the things Socrates speaks of in the Apology are the words of Plato only, but merely that the Apology as a work is both a defense of the Socratic legacy and a balm to his supporters and disciples following his death at the hand of the Athenian democracy.